All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera,
Count it.
Ready, camera.
And cue talent.
2,
One.
1, roll for record.
Have American restaurants reached a tipping point over tips? I'm John Phillips, and we're putting 15% on top of the rundown today. Influential restaurant executive Danny Meyer, who runs many of the most well-known dining hotspots in New York City, caused a stir recently when he announced the practice of tipping would soon be banned at all of his eateries. Why? He says he wants to close the wage gap between waitstaff, who diners interact with, and kitchen staff, who they hardly ever see. So he's going to raise prices a bit and then dispense the money himself by giving his employees a raise. And some say this is long overdue. In parts of the country, the minimum wage for restaurant workers can be as little as $2.13 an hour, provided they make enough tips to bring that up to the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Unions and their allies are campaigning for further minimum wage hikes for these workers across the country. But Mr. Meyer is partly reacting to a minimum wage hike with his no-tipping plan. Fast food workers in the state of New York are getting a pay raise to $15 an hour, which is more than even his high-end restaurants currently pay the kitchen staff. So he needs to give them a raise to compete with Burger King. So here's the question. Is this a good thing because tipping is an archaic and unfair practice in addition to being a pain in the neck? Or is it a bad thing because servers will no longer be rewarded for taking care of customers? Joining me to talk about all the controversy is author and PJTV contributor Scott Ott from his home studio in Dallas, Texas, and here in Southern California, stand-up comic PJTV contributor Stephen Cruiser. Now, I've never worked a job that has resulted in me getting tips, because if so, I would go bankrupt. I'm just not good at dealing with the public like that. I knew early on that would be a disaster. But I can speak of this from the point of view of a consumer. I love the tipping process. Because it gives you the opportunity to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. And it helps me out because I get better service. If they know that I'm a good tipper, and they know that I'm going to take care of them, guess what? I don't have to wait for a table. I get a stronger drink. I make sure that they find a spot for me when the restaurant is packed at the bar. It's a two-way street. And I like it from the point of view of the consumer. If they take away the ability for me to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior, then that ruins my experience. Your thoughts?
To me, it's a bit of a crapshoot, because I speak of it mostly from a consumer standpoint too, but I've also spent my entire career working in comedy clubs around service industry personnel, cocktail waitresses, bartenders, and a lot of those places are restaurants too. So I know what they go through with the people. And I think that at higher end places, this may not be as good a deal, because I know some people here who work some of the strip restaurants, and they make a pile of money.
You can make six figures being a
they're
bartender
all
or a waiter.
homeowners in Southern California. They have a lot of money. They're making great money up there. So I think at a place like that, this would really be a bad idea. I think at a lower scale place, it might help better, because people go in, in other places outside of Los Angeles, you can go in and have a meal for under $10 somewhere, and people get, then you're working for 70-cent tips and things like that. This could actually work out better for them. But from your standpoint about the service thing, that is huge. If you're a regular at a place and they know you tip, you get great service all the time there. And I don't like that part of the equation being taken away.
Scott, is this going to turn my favorite experience at my favorite restaurant into a trip to the DMV?
Yeah, pretty much. I think so. I mean, it's like who is ever going to? There are two words you will never hear again in a restaurant: Mr. Phillips. I mean, that's just not going to happen anymore. Nobody cares. Because you're just, come in, sit down, find a space to sit, because we're going to get paid the same whether you're delighted or not. Now, frankly, that said, I think it's cool that in a free marketplace, restaurants can experiment with different compensation systems, with different ways of pricing, with different ways of, rewarding their employees for good service. Let them run amok with that. What I don't like is what you brought up earlier, which is it's possible that some of these nicer restaurants are saying, you know what? We've got to change things here because the government is forcing fast food places and minimum wage places to jack up their minimum wage. And so now we have an artificial hand interfering in the marketplace with government, know-it-alls who think that they can somehow manipulate things. Ultimately, people are going to say, you know what? Maybe another meal at home this week wouldn't be a bad idea.
You know, I think the restaurant is going to reverse course here pretty fast, because when you're dealing with tips, you're essentially dealing with commission. The more the customer buys, the more the waiter or waitress or bartender makes.
Yes.
And if you're dining at my restaurant and I'm your bartender or I'm your waiter, and you're asking for recommendations, I can talk you into buying a $70 bottle of wine, or I can talk you into buying a $20 bottle of wine. If I get a cut of it, then I'm motivated to talk you into the $70 bottle of wine. If I get no cut of it, then what difference is it to me? And the overall sales of these restaurants are going to go down because your bartender and your waiter are also salesmen.
That's true, especially, again, when you're dealing with a nicer place. And I think that is definitely a downside to this. About the only upside I could see for a nicer place, though, is that the people you weed out are the difficult customers who don't tip well in a scenario like this, because they're not going to go there if they know the prices are automatically up. The reason they go to places like that is because they know they can eat something decent and then get away by being completely cheap on the tips, you know. So they're going to weed out some of that bad element. The thing I thought was the weirdest about this is where he's, you know, he wants to eat a little too egalitarian with the kitchen staff and the wait staff. The wait staffs are the guys that have to put up with the idiot at the table, okay? The kitchen staff doesn't have to come out and listen to, hey, I was talking, you know, they don't have to, so this guy should be paid more. So the whole collectivist Marxist mindset here, I don't like so much, but I think you were right about what you said, but I think it would be great if different places, like Scott said, let this be a free market thing. Let this place, you know, that place you can go to, you don't have to tip. You know, for those of you who are percentage challenged, let them all mix it up a little bit.
All right, here's what the world needs. The world needs the Scott Ott Guide to Tipping, because I was just thinking about this in preparation for the show. If you go to a restaurant and you order a Coke, you're expected to tip the waitress when they bring you the Coke. If you order a Coke on an airplane, you're not expected to tip at all. If you go get your hair cut, you're expected to give a tip. But if you go and you get your teeth cleaned, you're not supposed to tip them. I think Scott Ott needs to go ahead and create some sort of typology that explains when and where you're supposed to tip and how much.
Yeah, it's fascinating that the business world, or at least the companies that function within it, expect that we all understand their economic strategy. Like, you literally have to know, okay, well, in the airline business, let's see, how much does a flight attendant make? Okay, how much does a Coke cost? Like you're going to be running those calculations in your mind. But somehow, these customs have developed. Now, I will tell you that there have been many times when I go into a fairly low-priced restaurant, which is the kind I like, and have a beverage, you know, get a Coke, get a cup of coffee or something like that, but I tie up a table for a half an hour or an hour because I'm, you know, talking with somebody or whatever. I am not chained to 15 or 20% at that time. You look at that and you go, you know what? She did a great job. She was always friendly. She was cheerful. You know, the Coke was $2 here. Here's $5 or $10 or whatever. You can always tip to reward good service. What I'm afraid of here is that we're going from the idea of a gratuity and a reward for great service to an entitlement, which entitlements do nothing but embitter people on both ends.
And tipping is such a powerful custom in this country. I'll tell you, last week I was at a gig out of town and I ordered room service, which I rarely do. But the room service comes with the service charge and the gratuity added on already. And still, when he brought me the food, I felt guilty for not adding a tip on. Even though there was an 18% gratuity already added, I was struggling. It took me forever just to sit there and sign the thing. I said, the tip's on here, right? Right? It's on here, right? And you get that. So it's already got such a powerful grip. But then everybody isn't nice to people like we are either. I'm predisposed to being nice to service personnel because of my career. Scott's a nice guy. You're a nice guy. We know how it works. But there are plenty of idiots out there that'll go spend $100 and leave $5.
You know what this is going to create too? It's like Facebook if Facebook dropped the like button and only had an unlike button. Because they're taking away the carrot and they're only giving you the stick. If you get good service, instead of being able to say, okay, I like what happened, I'm going to give you a little something extra on the side here, the only thing you can do is if you have a bad experience, you can go trash them on Yelp.
I don't know if you guys have picked up on this yet, but John's never-ending cavalcade of analogies here about this, he doesn't like this idea at all. He's not a fan. I just
That's right.
don't know if you're picking up on
I like
that.
the tipping process. Anything to add, Scott, before we wrap up?
You know, I think my son works as a host at a restaurant, and it's interesting because he is the first point of contact for every customer. He's the one that's supposed to be the face of the business, the happy, how you doing? Let me show you how the system works here. Let me take you to your table. Is everything just the way you like it? And for doing that, he doesn't get any tips. However, when they call in for takeout and he just packs their food in a bag and they never really deal with him at all, except when they show up and he hands them the bag, for that, he gets tips. So you're right. The whole system is kind of weird, and I should write that Scott Ott book on tips, but I'd have to just make stuff up, which I guess, having done that at scrappleface.com for 10 years, is no problem at all for me. I'll do it.
Scott Ott, America's new Emily Post. All right. What do you think? Should restaurants ban tipping? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.